Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're continuing with the next part of this epic time chamber series. My name is Ash. Please, for me, drop a like, join the Patreon, and subscribe to the page. Also, leave your comments down below. With that, let's begin.
Cross my heart and hope to die. Welcome to my dark side.
The Saiyan prince clenched his fist, determination burning in his eyes, though his body was already bruised and battered. Wukong gave an easy smile, twirling his staff, the Ruyi Jingubang, with one hand. The sound of the metal rings jingling echoed softly, a serene contrast to the tension in the air. "I haven't fought in ages," Wukong said casually, his voice carrying a playful undertone. "This is going to be fun." Vegeta's jaw tightened as he remembered the humiliating exchange moments before. He had managed to land a single solid strike, yet Wukong had brushed it off like a mere inconvenience, as if swatting away a bothersome insect. The memory stung almost as much as the throbbing pain in his fist. "Don't get too comfortable," Vegeta snarled through gritted teeth. "I'm only getting started." Without hesitation, Vegeta lunged forward, throwing his right fist with devastating intent. The air cracked with the force of his strike, aiming to break bones and shatter Wukong's smug expression. But Wukong was ready. He caught Vegeta's fist mid-flight, slamming his palm against the Saiyan's knuckles. The clash of their energies created a deafening shockwave. A brilliant flash of purple and gold lit up the sky as the ground behind Wukong erupted, sending chunks of rock and debris hurtling through the air. Vegeta was sent skidding backward, his boots carving deep trails into the rubble as he struggled to stop himself. Wukong lowered his hand and pointed the Ruyi Jingubang at Vegeta. His smirk widened, filled with confidence, yet free of malice. "Show me what you can really do." Vegeta's eyes widened as Wukong vanished in a blur of speed, leaving nothing but a faint shimmer in the air. "Cloud-skipping step!" Wukong's voice echoed. The Saiyan warrior barely had time to react before Wukong reappeared behind him, staff raised high. Instinctively, Vegeta spun around, crossing his arms above his head, just in time to block the incoming strike. The impact was monumental. It felt as though an entire mountain had been dropped on him. The sheer force drove Vegeta to his knees, the rocky ground beneath him splintering under the pressure. Vegeta roared, pushing back with all his might. He wrenched the staff aside and countered with a furious flurry of punches and elbows, each one aimed with precision and lethal intent. His movements were sharp and calculated, honed by years of relentless training and the blood of a warrior race. Yet Wukong moved with an effortless grace, dodging or parrying each blow as though dancing to an unseen rhythm. His faint smile never faltered, a silent taunt that only fueled Vegeta's rage. Leaping backward, Vegeta clasped his hands over his chest, his fingers moving in a blur as he formed a rapid series of hand signs. Energy began to swirl around his palms, glowing with an ominous purple hue. It spiraled faster and faster, forming twin whirlpools of power. Vegeta thrust his hands forward, shouting, "Chakra Cannon!" The twin energy blasts tore through the air with a high-pitched screech, their destructive power evident in the way they distorted the air around them. Wukong raised an eyebrow, intrigued. He spread his arms wide and called out, "Somersault Cloud Barrier!" A radiant swirl of golden light materialized around him, forming a shimmering dome of energy. The chakra cannons struck the barrier head-on, detonating in a violent burst of purple arcs. The shockwave shook the battlefield, toppling stone pillars and scattering debris. When the smoke cleared, Wukong stood untouched, his barrier still glowing faintly. "Interesting," he mused, spinning the Ruyi Jingubang in his hand. Sparks of golden light danced around the staff, as if responding to his thoughts. "But let's see how you handle this." He pointed the staff forward and commanded, "Golden Needle Barrage." Dozens of razor-thin golden beams shot forth with blinding speed. Vegeta's instincts screamed danger. He leaped high into the air, narrowly avoiding the majority of the attack, but two beams managed to graze him. Sharp pain tore through his arm and thigh, leaving trails of blood in their wake. Snarling, Vegeta twisted in midair, gathering energy between his palms. He shouted, "Gallic Gun!" as a massive stream of purple energy erupted downward, aimed straight at Wukong. With a calm expression, Wukong twirled the Ruyi Jingubang, its movement a blur. "Heavenly Extension!" he shouted, and the staff stretched impossibly long, slicing through the Gallic Gun with ease. The attack split in two, its energy scattering harmlessly across the battlefield. Landing gracefully, Wukong rested the elongated staff on his shoulder. "That might have finished weaker opponents," he said with a chuckle. "But you didn't really think a weak attack like that could hurt an immortal being like me, did you?" Vegeta's breath came in heavy gasps. His muscles screamed in protest, and blood dripped from his wounds, but his eyes burned with unyielding resolve. "Who is this guy?" Vegeta thought, his mind racing. "He's barely trying." The battlefield crackled with tension, the weight of immense power pressing down on the shattered ground. Vegeta's chest rose and fell in uneven gasps, his brow glistening with sweat. He hadn't noticed it yet, but his body was changing, adapting. Each time Wukong's strikes connected, Vegeta's demonic blood silently absorbed fragments of the Monkey King's godly ki, weaving it into his own energy like threads in a tapestry. This ancient ability, a hallmark of the primordial demon gods, lay dormant within Vegeta, now surfacing without his conscious awareness. But Wukong stood unfazed, tapping his Ruyi Jingu lightly against the ground. The faint, almost melodic chime of the staff mocked the chaos around them. "What's the matter, Vegeta?" Wukong teased, his tone casual yet cutting. "Don't tell me you're starting to lose your edge. You Saiyans used to be fiercer than this." Vegeta wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, his scowl deepening. The Monkey King's words bit into his pride like a dagger. "I'd rather die," he barked, his voice laced with defiance. Retreat was never an option for Vegeta. His warrior's pride dictated that this battle could only end one way, his opponent's defeat or his own. Bracing himself, Vegeta spread his legs into a fighting stance. His aura flared around him, dark and crackling with power. Bolts of electricity raced along his arms, weaving together with the sinister hum of his demonic chakra. The ground beneath him trembled as his energy surged. "Final!" Vegeta bellowed, bringing his hands together. Dark, destructive chakra coiled into his palms, fusing seamlessly with the glowing, ominous light of Hakai energy. The sheer intensity of the gathered energy distorted the air, bending light around him. Flash! The colossal beam erupted from his hands, its force ripping apart the earth beneath it. The massive attack surged forward, a blinding pillar of destruction tearing through the battlefield and roaring skyward. Thunder boomed as if the heavens themselves recoiled from Vegeta's fury. Wukong's eyes glinted with interest as he raised his free hand. "Celestial Palm Bomb!" he called, forming a swirling orb of golden cosmic energy in his palm. With a calm but decisive motion, he thrust the orb into the heart of the final flash. The clash of energies was cataclysmic. A deafening explosion erupted, shaking the battlefield and sending a mushroom cloud of dust and debris into the air. Vegeta shielded his face as the shockwave hit him, its force rattling his bones. For a moment, the entire battlefield seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the smoke to clear. When the dust finally settled, Vegeta's eyes widened in disbelief. There stood Wukong, utterly unscathed, one foot firmly planted on the ground. His Ruyi Jingu pointed skyward, as if he had simply swatted away the attack. "You actually made me exert some effort," Wukong remarked, rolling his shoulders with a smirk. "Good. Keep it coming." "He survived that?" Vegeta muttered, his voice a mix of shock and frustration. His face twisted with disbelief. "And not a scratch? He really is immortal." But his astonishment was short-lived, replaced by a burning resolve. With a furious snarl, Vegeta surged forward, his boots grinding against the rubble. His strikes came fast and relentless, each blow aimed to dismantle the unshakable Monkey King. Mid-swing, Vegeta disappeared in a blur of motion, reappearing behind Wukong with a fierce elbow aimed at the back of his neck. Wukong pivoted fluidly, raising his staff. Heaven-splitting parry. The collision of Vegeta's elbow against the staff reverberated through his bones. Gritting his teeth, Vegeta pressed forward, driving his knee toward Wukong's ribs. Wukong countered effortlessly, delivering a swift palm to Vegeta's chest that sent him hurtling backward. The force drove the air from Vegeta's lungs, but he could feel it again, the subtle siphoning of Wukong's divine ki into his own body with every strike. Vegeta landed on his feet, skidding to a halt, his fists trembling with frustration and newfound power. He wasn't entirely sure what was happening, but something within him was changing. He couldn't ignore the gradual surge building inside him, dark and potent. Wukong, growing mildly irritated by Vegeta's persistence, spun the Ruyi Jingu above his head. The staff whistled as it sliced through the air. Then, Wukong's voice shifted into a commanding chant, each word reverberating with ancient power. "Body outside body," he shouted, plucking 2 strands of hair from his head. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed them into the air. In a flash of golden light, the hairs transformed into 2 identical clones of Wukong, each one brandishing their own Ruyi Jingubang. The numbers 1 and 2 glowed faintly on their foreheads, marking them as distinct extensions of the Monkey King. The clones grinned, their auras identical to the originals. They surrounded Vegeta, spinning their staffs lazily, as if relishing the moment. Vegeta's eyes darted between the 3 Wukongs, his fists clenched tighter, his mind racing. 3 of them, he thought, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. This is insane! The battlefield trembled as Vegeta's fierce gaze darted from one Wukong to the next. His sharp instinctual mind assessed his opponents, though confusion gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. They moved in perfect unison, their smirks as maddening as the originals. Clones? Fine, Vegeta growled, his voice dripping with venom. He clenched his fist, his aura flaring like a violent storm. I'll take you all on. With a burst of speed, Vegeta lunged at the closest Wukong, the #1 clone, slamming a devastating backhand into its side. The ground shattered, cratering beneath the impact as the clone erupted into a shower of golden sparks. Vegeta barely had time to savor the moment before he felt the whoosh of air behind him. Instinctively, he ducked, narrowly avoiding a strike from the staff of #2 clone. With a roar, Vegeta unleashed his energy in a chaotic wave, his aura exploding outward and knocking both duplicates away. The #2 clone spun through the air, recovering gracefully. Hovering above, it raised its staff, golden flames licking at its edges. Blazing staff barrage, it bellowed. Fiery blasts rained down in rapid succession, each streaking toward Vegeta with deadly precision. Vegeta crossed his arms to block, his muscles straining as the fiery energy clashed against him. He managed to deflect most of the barrage, but one searing blast sliced across his shoulder. Pain flared instantly, but so too did a twisted, invigorating surge. The dark siphon within him greedily fed on the attack's energy, amplifying his own ki in a dangerous, unnatural way. Enough! Vegeta snarled, his voice a mix of anger and determination. His hands moved rapidly into a sequence of intricate hand signs, dark energy swirling violently around him. He thrust his palms forward, shouting, Dark Gallic Flash! A wave of purple-black destruction energy tore through the battlefield, carving deep trenches into the earth as it roared toward the Wukong clone. The attack radiated raw, chaotic power, promising obliteration. But then, Vegeta saw it, something that froze his blood. The #1 clone raised a single hand, slapping the incoming wave aside as though it were nothing more than an annoying insect. The attack veered off course, detonating far away in a massive explosion that rocked the distant horizon. Impossible! Vegeta shouted, his voice trembling with disbelief. His hands lowered slightly, his body tense. How could they be so strong? What Vegeta didn't yet realize was the horrifying truth. These weren't just ordinary clones. Wukong's technique wasn't like other duplication abilities, which typically halved the user's power across each copy. Wukong's duplicates, formed from strands of his own hair, carried his full strength. They were as powerful as the original, retaining every ounce of his energy and skill. Wukong's laughter echoed across the battlefield, low and smug. He stood calmly, observing the fight as though it were a leisurely spar. In his manifestation energy form, he could only produce 2 duplicates, but in his true body, the Monkey King could summon 1,000 copies, each identical in power. This ability was part of what earned him the title of God Killer. It was also one of the reasons why the gods had feared him, why Zeno himself had deemed it necessary to seal Wukong away before his strength grew too great. I think I overdid it, Wukong muttered to himself, snapping his fingers. In an instant, the 2 clones vanished into thin air, leaving Vegeta standing alone, visibly shaken. He's not strong enough to handle even one of me, let alone 3. Wukong tapped his chin thoughtfully, then grinned. Still, I wanted to show off a little. No harm in reminding him that I could end this battle whenever I want. Wukong's voice carried a hint of amusement, but there was something deeper, an ancient, prideful arrogance. Despite his nonchalant demeanor, Wukong was a warrior to his core. He had a history steeped in triumphs, and the pride that Saiyans carried in their veins was something they'd inherited from him. Vegeta clenched his fist, feeling a surge of adrenaline pump through his body. His mind raced, and for the first time in a long while, doubt crept into his thoughts. His confidence flickered like a dying flame as he grappled with the overwhelming power before him. But then, deep within him, the beast roared. The great ape, The primal essence of his Saiyan blood stirred in his soul. Its voice echoed like a drumbeat in his mind, ancient and commanding. "You must leave a godly impression," the beast growled, its tone both fierce and encouraging. "You are not just a king in name. You are the king of the Saiyans, a god among gods. You can't let it end like this." The words struck Vegeta like a thunderclap. His heart pounded as the beast continued, its voice growing louder. "Every Uzaru dreams of this, to stand before the Monkey King himself, to prove their strength. Don't let this chance slip away. Let me take over, unless you'd rather run back to Bulma." "Get out of my head," Vegeta shouted aloud, his aura flaring wildly. His voice was a defiant roar, filled with fury and resolve. "Give up?" he spat, speaking more to himself than anyone else. "That's not my style. Just sit back and watch as I annihilate your so-called god." The ground trembled as Wukong raised the Ruyi Jingubang high, its golden surface glowing with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the heavens. His eyes sparkled with mischief as he pointed the staff downward and slammed it into the earth. Heavenly shockwave! A blinding golden ripple surged outward in every direction, tearing through the battlefield like an unstoppable tidal wave. Flames of spiritual energy ignited around Vegeta's feet, catching him off guard. The force of the shockwave hurled him skyward, flipping uncontrollably as he tried to regain his balance. In the blink of an eye, Wukong appeared behind him, a savage grin plastered across his face. "Pillar-crushing strike!" he bellowed, driving the Ruyi Jingubang into Vegeta's chest with the force of a meteor. The impact cracked Vegeta's armor, and he spat blood as agony ripped through him. His body screamed in protest, but deep within him, the dark siphon continued to work its sinister magic, feeding on the godly energy surrounding Wukong and amplifying Vegeta's own ki. Gritting his teeth, Vegeta twisted midair and unleashed a desperate right hook aimed at Wukong's cheek. This time, it landed with a sickening crack, and the Monkey King staggered backward for the first time, surprise flashing across his face. Wiping the corner of his mouth with a thumb, Wukong chuckled. "That's it, Vegeta. You adapt faster than I expected. This is good," he said, his voice a mix of approval and excitement. Vegeta scowled, his breathing labored. "Is he not taking this fight seriously?" he muttered under his breath, his frustration mounting. Still clutching his chest as his lungs burned, Vegeta let out a growl of defiance. "I never back down," he declared, his voice unsteady but resolute. Wukong's grin widened as he stepped back, spinning the Ruyi Jingubang in his hands. "Let's see how you handle this then." He hurled the staff high into the sky, its golden glow brightening until it seemed to merge with the sun itself. With a loud battle cry, Wukong shouted, "Rain of 10,000 rods!" In an instant, the sky filled with countless golden staffs, each shimmering like spears of light. Vegeta's eyes widened in disbelief as the weapons hovered overhead, aimed directly at him. "You've got to be kidding!" Vegeta exclaimed, his heart pounding. The rods began to fall, a deadly rain that turned the heavens into a lethal storm. Vegeta's aura erupted around him as he darted through the barrage, weaving between the golden missiles with every ounce of speed and precision he could muster. He used his arms, legs, and bursts of ki to deflect or destroy those he couldn't avoid. Each rod that struck the ground detonated in a massive explosion, sending shockwaves through the crumbling terrain. The sky and earth seemed to blur together in a chaotic symphony of destruction. Sweat poured down Vegeta's face as he gritted his teeth, every muscle in his body straining to keep him alive. One misstep would mean certain death, yet despite the overwhelming odds, he refused to crumble. Clapping his hands together, Vegeta summoned his dark, destructive energy, the swirling black and purple ki coalescing in front of him. His voice roared above the chaos. "Hakai!" The energy formed a barrier around him, glowing with the sheer power of destruction itself. The golden rods slammed into the barrier one by one, ringing out like metal striking metal. Vegeta pushed harder, pouring more energy into the shield as he braced himself. But then, something happened that left him stunned. His Hakai energy, a power that could erase even spirits from existence, failed to destroy the rods. Instead, the staffs remained intact, pressing against the barrier with unrelenting force. "No way!" Vegeta whispered, his voice trembling as realization set in. When the final wave of rods fell, the Hakai barrier shattered into a shower of sparks. Vegeta stumbled forward, bruised and battered, yet still standing. All around him, the battlefield was littered with craters and fragments of golden staff, a testament to the ferocity of the assault. From high above, Wukong hovered with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "I'll admit, he began, his tone carrying a rare hint of respect. "You're one fascinating Saiyan. You even possess the power of those demons, the ones Zeno sought to erase." For a moment, Wukong seemed lost in thought, his gaze distant as he recalled a dark chapter of history. Zeno, in his divine authority, had ordered the extinction of another race, one with overwhelming potential that he deemed too dangerous to exist. The memory lingered in Wukong's mind, a grim reminder of the god's fear of mortal evolution. Meanwhile, Vegeta inhaled raggedly, his body screaming for rest. Yet despite his exhaustion, he managed to smirk. "Is that the best you've got, old monkey?" he taunted, his voice dripping with defiance. Unbeknownst to Vegeta, his body was undergoing a transformation. The dark siphon continued to absorb Wukong's godly aura, blending it with his own power, combined with the passive ability of Ultra Ego, which made him stronger with every blow he endured. Vegeta's strength was growing exponentially. The duality of these powers, destruction and absorption, was creating a new kind of energy within Vegeta. He could feel it surging through his veins, his aura rising with each passing moment. Above him, Wukong's grin widened. "Fascinating," he said to himself. "Let's see just how far this Saiyan can go." Wukong's laugh rumbled across the battlefield, deep and resonant, like the roar of distant thunder. His golden aura flared, casting an almost divine glow over the fractured terrain. "Oh, you poor little subject," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "You're fighting nothing more than a fragment of me, a mere manifestation, and yet you're struggling." His grin widened and his tone turned contemplative. "If my real body weren't bound beneath that cursed mountain, well, you wouldn't even be a memory by now." He muttered the last part to himself, his confidence radiating like the sun. Before Vegeta could process the taunt, Wukong vanished. The air around him crackled as an overwhelming pressure exploded behind him. "Too slow," Wukong's voice whispered, just as his fist drove into Vegeta's stomach with the force of a comet. Vegeta's eyes bulged, a guttural groan escaping his lips as the air was forced from his lungs. Blood spattered the ground as his body buckled, but his Saiyan pride refused to let him fall. Shaking, he raised one arm, his hand glowing with charged energy. "Big bang! Attack!" he roared, firing the massive sphere of destruction, ki point blank, into Wukong's face. The explosion lit up the battlefield like a second sun, its violent force ripping through the air and tossing both warriors apart. The ground beneath them fractured, sending debris raining down in every direction. Vegeta landed roughly, coughing and clutching his midsection as he forced himself upright. His vision blurred for a moment, but when the smoke cleared, his eyes locked onto Wukong. The Monkey King strode through the dissipating dust cloud, unbothered but not untouched. A faint burn mark marred his cheek, its presence almost laughable against the backdrop of his radiant aura. Wukong touched it lightly, then grinned wider than before. "Well, well," he mused, his voice carrying an amused edge. "You finally landed a solid attack. I'm almost impressed." Vegeta glared at him, his chest heaving. Wukong chuckled. "Ah, yes, learning as you fight, adapting with every blow. That's the Saiyan spirit. I feel almost proud. Even after all this time, my traits still run deep in my descendants." His golden eyes sparkled with pride, though the smirk on his face betrayed his endless superiority. But suddenly, his expression shifted. A flicker of confusion crossed his face as his body shimmered unnaturally, fading in and out of existence like a mirage. He held out his hand, watching it fade and then re-solidify. "What's this?" he muttered, his voice calm but curious. His fingers flexed experimentally as he examined his fading form. "Is this little Saiyan sealing my power?" Wukong chuckled again, though there was a tinge of self-deprecation in it. "How careless of me. It seems my years of imprisonment have left me rusty. To think I've been losing power without realizing it." As he spoke, his golden aura flared anew, and his eyes narrowed with determination. "Ah, now I remember," he said, his tone sharpening. "The dark siphon. Of course, that demonic blood of yours. So it's doing more than just keeping you alive." Reaching up, Wukong plucked a single golden strand of hair from his head. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed it into the air. The strand glowed and twisted, transforming into a new clone of Wukong, identical in every way. The Monkey King snapped his fingers, and his original manifestation body dissolved into golden particles. The clone, now imbued with the full power of the original, stepped forward with a wicked grin. The sheer magnitude of Wukong's ability struck Vegeta like a blow to the chest. This was no ordinary foe. This was a god killer, a being whose very existence defied logic and mortality. What did he just do?" Vegeta muttered, his voice laced with confusion. His fists clenched, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of what he'd just witnessed. Did he just kill himself? The situation was beyond anything Vegeta had faced before, and for a moment, frustration clouded his thoughts. He had come so far, endured so much, and yet this fight felt endless. He gritted his teeth, his Saiyan pride flaring once more. "I've had enough!" Vegeta roared, his voice echoing across the battlefield. Ignoring the pain racking his body, he charged forward with renewed fury. His fists and feet became a blur of motion, every strike fueled by martial arts, precision, and raw desperation. High kicks, elbow smashes, and feints flowed seamlessly together as Vegeta pushed himself to the limit. Between every strike, his body pulsed with chakra, his energy flaring in bursts of dark, destructive ki. He weaved his attacks with deadly intent, each move faster and more ferocious than the last. "Dark Gaelic Flash," Vegeta bellowed, releasing a massive beam of dark purple energy toward Wukong. The beam roared like a tidal wave, carving through the air with destructive force, but he wasn't done yet. Vegeta's aura erupted once more, and he began to draw in energy from deep within himself. The ground beneath him cracked and split as the raw power gathered in his core. "Take this," he roared, detonating his final explosion technique. The blast expanded outward in a massive sphere of destructive energy, shaking the heavens themselves. Though he held back just enough to avoid the attack's suicidal consequences, its sheer force was enough to obliterate anything in its path. The Monkey King, Wukong, stood at the center of the chaos, an aura of ancient power radiating from his form. His wild laughter echoed through the broken landscape as he countered Vegeta's attacks with devastating precision. "Eyes of truth!" Wukong bellowed, his golden eyes flaring with an otherworldly brilliance. The shimmering illusions of Vegeta's ultra ego shattered like fragile glass under the piercing gaze. Vegeta snarled, frustrated but undeterred. The Saiyan prince darted around his opponent with calculated speed, subconsciously summoning the devastating power of the dark siphon. Each blow carried the weight of his very essence, and his aura burned like a dark star. But Wukong was always one step ahead. "Body outside! Body!" Wukong called, splitting himself into a perfect clone. The duplicate sprang to life, its movements indistinguishable from the original. Vegeta twisted in midair, aiming a crushing elbow at the clone, but it dissolved just before impact, reappearing at his blind spot. Vegeta spat, spinning to counter with a knee strike, only for Wukong to meet him with a blow of his mystical staff, Ruyi Jingubang. The staff elongated in an instant, slamming Vegeta backward and carving a deep trench into the earth. The battlefield was a wasteland of craters and ruptured earth, the ground unable to endure the magnitude of their clash. Vegeta's muscles screamed as he pushed his body beyond its limit, drawing deeper into the dark siphon. But there was a cost. Its power grew heavier, threatening to consume him entirely. He remembered what had happened to Arak, a god who had once dared to channel this same energy. Arak's body had burst under the strain, despite the combined might of Goku, Gohan, Broly, and Vegeta working to suppress him. Even now, Vegeta felt the siphon testing his limit. Wukong watched him with a smirk, twirling the Ruyi Jingubang in one hand as if it weighed nothing. His energy was like an endless ocean, boundless, ancient, and impossible to measure. Despite Vegeta's relentless assaults, Wukong remained in control, his movements fluid and unyielding. Vegeta roared, his ultra ego form surging with violet flames. His aura spiked dangerously as he charged all his power into one last desperate attack. "This ends now," he bellowed, lunging forward with a punch that carried every ounce of his strength. Wukong caught it, one-handed. The shockwave from the impact erupted outward, splitting the ground beneath them and scattering debris for miles. For a moment, Vegeta's eyes widened in disbelief. Wukong's golden eyes flashed, his grin vanishing into a serious expression. "You've got spirit, Vegeta," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "But spirit alone won't defeat me." With a powerful yank, Wukong pulled Vegeta forward and slammed him into the ground. The impact created a colossal crater, the force rippling through the planet like an earthquake. Vegeta gasped, blood spraying from his mouth as his ultra ego aura flickered and waned. Wukong raised the Ruyi Jingubang high above his head, golden energy crackling around its tip like a miniature sun. "You fought well," he said quietly, the power radiating from him, suffocating. "But you're simply no match for me." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Vegeta's body refused to move, pinned down by the invisible weight of Wukong's overwhelming power. Pebbles floated upward from the sheer energy radiating in the air. The Ruyi Jingubang descended like a falling star, stopping mere inches from Vegeta's head. Wukong hesitated. His expression shifted from disdain to something more thoughtful. With a grunt, he slammed the staff into the ground beside Vegeta, instead of delivering the final blow. The impact alone was enough to send cracks racing across the shattered earth. "You have potential," Wukong said, stepping back. His shimmering golden figure began to flicker, like a flame in the wind. "But you've still got a long way to go." Vegeta coughed violently, his chest heaving as he struggled to lift his head. Blood dripped from his mouth, staining the broken ground beneath him. "I guess this is all I'm capable of," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I gave it everything I had, and still fell short." His head drooped, his vision dimming as exhaustion overtook him. This being, or Zeno, I wonder who's stronger. Guess I'll never know. Goodbye, everyone. Maybe I'll see you all again. His words trailed off as his body collapsed. Pain racked his form, every fiber of his being screaming in agony. He could still feel faint traces of Wukong's godly energy coursing through his veins, mingling dangerously with the dark power of the siphon. It was too much. His vision blurred, and the world around him began to fade into darkness, and then silence. And that's it for today's episode, guys. If you watched to the end, then that could be an indication that you enjoy the series. So please leave a like on the video. Thank you and take care.